All right, so this is part 4, our final part of week 1's lecture. We talk about the religious period in Europe during early colonization. All right, this is John Calvin and his magnificent beard. By the 15th century, a split had occurred between the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy, the Pope, as people searched for religious affirmation and purity while finding only corrupt popes and bishops. Men like Martin Luther took steps to find religious assurance. Luther believed that salvation came from a strong faith. After being ordained as a priest, he grew critical of the Catholic Church as an institution. In 1517, he nailed 95 theses to a local church door, attacking the Catholic Church for selling salvation through indulgences. Back then, if you went to a Catholic church and you had sinned, you could actually buy your way out of it. And this infuriated folks like Martin Luther. Martin Luther was excommunicated, but that did not silence him. Luther did not intend to create a split in the Catholic Church, but during the 1520s and 30s, Lutheran churches began popping up around Europe as his ideas became widespread. Calvinism soon followed as French theologian John Calvin, a successor of Luther, took parts of the 95 theses but added his own spin. Instead of Luther's loving God, Calvin created an all-knowing deity, and only those who had been predestined by God would be able to obtain salvation. The best way to discover if one was destined for salvation was just to behave saintly. The Protestant Reformation shattered the unity of Christendom in Western Europe. Spain, Italy, and Ireland remained Catholic, while other European countries adopted versions of Calvinism and Lutheranism, with England developing the Anglican Church under Henry VIII. Thus, religion created another motivation for empires to colonize the Americas. Believing their own religion was the true one, they needed to bring salvation to natives and spread their influence through the acquisition of new lands. Okay, so this is a very important part of that whole discussion of Martin Luther is not only did it create a religious split in Europe, but it created another motivation for colonization. All right? And that is a poor quality picture of Sir Walter Raleigh. After the installation of Queen Elizabeth I, Humphrey Gilbert received the first English colonial charter. Now, a charter, a document issued by a sovereign ruler or other authority that creates a corporation. In this case, the charter was given by the Queen. Gilbert was tasked with settling any territory in America that wasn't already owned by Christian peoples, which was a very pie-in-the-sky, far-reaching charter as far as expectations go. In 1584, Gilbert's stepbrother, Walter Raleigh, led a voyage to the Outer Banks here in North Carolina. He was knighted. Contact with the Roanoke people was friendly, but the bullying of the expedition's leaders, the leaders were doing the bullying, that is, Sir Richard Grenville and Ralph Lane, alienated the natives. The settlers had to flee, with plans to establish a second colony further north. However, in 1587, the colonists returned and were not warmly greeted by the Roanoke under the orders of John White. That's when they came back. White left for Europe to get more supplies, and when he returned in 1590, the colony had disappeared, possibly having fled to a nearby island called Croatan. Who from Europe would continue to displace native peoples in North America? Some would remain in Europe with the security of what they knew. Others would seek opportunity, riches, and glory by traveling to the New World. We will look at colonization and the problems that came with it next time. So to bring it back to contingency, right, that's what I started talking about at the beginning of this lecture. What if the Spanish hadn't funded Columbus? Or what if he'd never made it to the East Indies? When would the two continents have interacted for the first time? What would the Americas look like now? We think of it as having to happen the way it did because that's what did happen, but the landscape of America could look very different if not for the series of events that led to Columbus's arrival. And next time we're going to talk about conflict between these two different types of people, the Europeans and the native folks. and what happens when they come into contact with each other on a larger scale.